thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really honored to be here, and I was listening very carefully some of the statements which were made yesterday by some of the activist and journalist colleagues, and I hope that they are also here today and they are listening also the comments and the suggestions of the academics, and this will be a space of mutual learning and listening to each other's points. So, yeah. What I would like to talk about is this illiberal memory politics, and I would like to start with a quiz, right? So I show you a photo. I hope yes. The question is, who is on the photo? If somebody shout in, I will buy the coffee in the... Who is that? 9. Okay. So, Hanna Szenes, exactly. This is Hanna Szenes. And so, I mean, why is this a problem? That's what I would like to talk about, right? That this is, on the one hand, you should be happy, right? Hanna Szenes, you know, in 10 to 20 meter, you know, on a kommunalka building. But, I mean, there are some issues here, right? So, there is no other European country who was actually the Hanna Szenes who gave the solution. Of course, Konstantin. Okay, thank you. So, there is no other European country that has been mentioned as often as Hungary, discussion about illiberal memory politics. From 2010, the right-wing populist Fidesz, in coalition with the Christian Democratic Party, won 4 consecutive elections. From 2010, Fidesz has been under international pressure to comply with written and unwritten laws, including those related to the Holocaust remembrance. Needless to say, without success. During the past decade, the Hungarian government has performed a long list of interventions in the field of memory politics. And we heard that before, erected Second World War monuments at night, rehabilitated controversial politicians of interwar times, rewrote history curriculum in the secondary education, and founded a number of historical research institutes and museums to re-educate masses and to give legitimacy to new cadres in history. Also set up institutions of training, creating Illiberal International from Brazil to Germany, from US to South Africa, hosting on the European taxpayers' money dubious figures who are advertised as academic authorities. I would like to share the recent developments. After that, I argue that one needs a new theoretical framework to understand this development. And I'm starting with arguing that the previous frameworks are not sufficient. I don't think that this is a backlash. I don't think that this is an authoritarianism, but rather I argue for a new form of illiberalism and connecting it with institutions and state institutions, because they are the key players here. So, there is a clear government plan to discredit, delegitimize, and defund existing institutions critical of its activity, while the government not only destroyed, but built new institutions and parallel institutions loyal to them, trying to replace the critical ones. So this is one of the main messages, this parallelity of these institutions. What are these parallel institutions? Parallel religious institutions, parallel historical research institutions, and parallel textbooks. So, this process also happened in the case of Jewish religious organizations, the Jewish communities, that they are creating pro-illiberal institutions and destroying previous practices and narratives, discrediting, delegitimizing, defunding them. First, the governments supported the United Community of Hungarian Israelites, a small Orthodox organization with large international network, and the government with them created an authentic and unquestionably Jewish-looking representation of Jews in Hungary, men with long beards, black coat and hats, where the large majority of Jews opposing the government policies are assimilated. The Alliance of Hungarian Jewish Communities, the organization which took a stand against Orban at home and abroad, is defunded. This is the organization which actually, in this Holocaust Memorial Year, announced a blockade against this commemoration. In addition to government policies, a memory was incorporated, a new victim group of the Holocaust narrative, which is the Romani, and they called it indirect genocide. And I will come back to this point of playing with the words. And the government aim was to transform the moral relationship between minority and majority with adding a new victim group without reflecting either on the structural reasons of discrimination nor the responsibility of the state. So this is one parallel structure. The other one is the research institutions. There are 7 new historical research institutions which were set up without any quality assurance, mostly hiring young men without a PhD. And the third is the textbook market. Only one textbook remained, one in the whole country. So, and this is also connected to 2 important disturbing phenomena, which actually makes it difficult to recognize what we are dealing with. One is the issue of double speech. And the double speech is a reaction to the international normative power of the Holocaust remembrance, because this is kind of sending, the different representatives are giving very different messages into the different audience. And there is a good cop, there is a bad cop, and then, the different international actors can pick and choose whom do they listen to, depending on the geopolitical responses. And also the disturbing anti-intellectualism. And this photo with which I actually started is a very good example why this is so problematic. So the illiberal intellectual tradition might be hierarchical and patriarchal, but it is not empty as far as values are concerned. In the illiberal states, government's appointments can turn almost anybody into an expert historian. No previous credentials or training are needed, only loyalty to the regime. Despite the government's strong anti-communist discourse, in reality, even previous Communist Party members can play an important role if they prove their unquestionable loyalty. Staff of the newly founded historical research institutes have very low professional standing, as recruitment was never open nor transparent. And the other aspect is the self-censorship, that as a reaction, there are all this self-censorship of the historians who are still employed in these defunded institutions, and members of the profession internalized fear from illiberal politics because of the ongoing harassment and the experience of being put on the list consisting of the enemies of the nation. I had the honor to be there several times, or as members of the opposition or leading intellectuals. The illiberal state has achieved its aim of reconceptualizing the self-censorship and fear. If the historians censor the text of their colleagues, then this is the end of academic freedom. By stressing the suffering of the nation, there is this new paradigm evolved, which is also the de-Judaization of the Holocaust narrative, and it makes Jewish victims invisible and their experiences marginal. As illiberalism is based on a strong group identity and the acknowledgement of the other as other, there is another novel element of this illiberal paradigm. At the same time, history seems to be repeating itself. As it has been widely discussed, post-1945 anti-fascist rhetoric invisibilized Jewish identity and Jews as a group. Presently, according to Illiberal State's memory rhetoric, all survivors are victims, while the perpetrators, especially the local perpetrators, are conveniently forgotten. And you can ask the question, why is this happening? Why is this happening? Why do we have to look at this pretty disturbing mural of Hannah Senes? And I would like to bring in the concept of unashamed citizens. Unashamed citizens have been a major force behind progressive movements and revolutions. By ignoring and challenging the economy of emotions, different social groups have successfully challenged value systems that were previously seen unchangeable, like the Holocaust canonized narrative. Unashamed citizens are not simply trying to overcome their own shame and live in a perfect ideal state where no one ever has a bad feeling or negative emotion about themselves. This fantasy is tied to a highly individualistic account of moral agency as a lever for changing collective and social dynamics. And this social dynamics is not static, not individualistic, and can change collective social dynamics towards exclusionary practices and not only inclusionary practices. What is cool can shift and alter from the context to context. And in this talk, I'm actually arguing that the illiberal memory politics uses the concept of shame and unashamed citizens, creating a new Holocaust narrative. So why is this happening, right? And there are basically three explanations. One, which is speaking about the distortion. And this is an expert audience. You have read the IHRA definition of distortion, right? The other is, which is about revisionism, right? And this distortion, which is there, doesn't answer to the key question. Why would someone distort certain facts? The concept of distortion assumes there is one truth, and those who are distorting it are just not smart and can be educated to learn and accept the truth. How difficult this can be in the case of interpreting past events. The second framework considers the motivation of those who change this interpretative framework. And Tucker's typology of historical revision presents these strategies. The significance-driven, where the change of the historians find significant history, so it changes what historians find significant. The evidence-driven, when new evidence is discovered. And value-driven, when historical events and processes are re-evaluated to a new system of values becoming hegemonic. The process of the Holocaust memorialization, the alteration, is an example of value-driven revisionism. New illiberal values are becoming hegemonic, pushed by the unashamed citizens, and they are being institutionalized in education, textbooks, museums, research projects, supported by the European Union taxpayers without any transparency or professional control. So, but I would like to explain the developments in this illiberal memory politics in the terms of a paradigm change. And this interpretative framework not only accounts for the motivation of the unashamed citizens, but also how the previous anti-fascist Holocaust canon was hijacked by the illiberal government. As recent research on Holocaust in Hungary has focused on the fight against Holocaust deniers, no attention has been paid to how knowledge about the Holocaust was produced. Therefore, the Holocaust narrative did not move from the position that there is one and only truth, and did not acknowledge that truth continued to be a social process that is theoretically mediated. How did the previous truth regimes contribute to the post-truth of illiberal memory politics? So political scientists reflecting on this unprecedented success of Orban's series of electoral victories, were forced to reconsider not only the analytical tools, but also the concepts in order to understand this phenomenon. I listed the competitive authoritarianism, illiberal state, mafia state, and with a Polish sociologist, Weronika Grzebalska, comparing Hungary and Poland, we argued that there is a new form of governance stems from the failures of globalized neoliberal democracy. Based on its modus operandi, we call this regime as illiberal polypore state. Before you start Googling, this polypore is this mushroom which lives on the trunk of the tree. And I also know that's a very biological metaphor, and I'm happy to explain you later why I think is useful in the Q&A. So it feeds on the vital resources of the previous political system, channeling resources, but contributing its decay, setting up parallel institutions, channeling the resources, and the polypore is not producing anything else than the polypore. The polypore state works with what is referred to mnemonic security, only interested in its existence. And the translation of history and its application, as well as their identity-shaping effects are becoming geopolitical factors. So why an illiberal polypore state uses memory politics to keep the power is well known. But the descriptive analysis, we have missed one crucial point, that how this state operates and how actually is taken as a model by other states and political actors. So I just would like to flag this as a warning sign, that Hungary serves as a laboratory. And some aspects of these policies, you might say that, this is happening in countries, in faraway countries we know so little. But I just would like to flag that these kind of elements are appropriated and used by very different forces all around the globe. So, but this is important. The illiberal state doesn't have original ideas. Everything used as value has already been invented previously, but what is new is both the modus operandi and the fact that these values are only important on the surface, and to obscure the real purpose, the need to maintain the power, this hegemonic fight, to use the Gramscian term. The illiberal state is an assemblage of previously existing and well-functioning ideas, like nostalgia and anti-communist nationalism. It uses existing concepts, frameworks, institutions for its own purpose. It creates a parallel world and only keeps the original institutions, values, spaces as resources for its own existence. The existence is the basis for creating of knowledge and the starting point of getting to know the world around us. Many were shocked to note the recent emergence of this post-truth phenomenon in which the content doesn't matter, just the framework. This is the characteristic of the memory politics of illiberal polypore state. It exploits and appropriates various aspects of the European liberal democratic project, institutions, procedures, concepts, funding opportunities, strategies, civil society adjustment mechanisms, and policies. Illiberal forces only use this to maintain their power. I'm telling it third times, but it's really important. Due to the character of their governance, instead of calling this states illiberal democracy, it is more accurate to refer to them as illiberal democracy exploitations. It is one made cheaply, it is cheap, and it is paid by the European taxpayers to make it even cheaper, and for easy profit of the illiberal camp, relying on time-worn formulas despite hyperbolic revolutionary claims made by illiberal politicians, as well as based on misappropriating and eroding the very democratic procedures to which illiberals owe their rise to power. The distinction must be made between conservative and illiberals. Conservative critique often driven by authentic and humble religiosity. And we might discuss this, but that's my point. And the critique of communism. But the illiberal system is fundamentally different. This is not conservative, and it actually creates a major threat to conservatism. For its values and social policies are just fig leaves to cover up the real goal, which is nothing less than enrichment of the circles of friends. While the neoliberalization of Eastern Europe after 1989, the state and its institutions, including social security, education, and healthcare, became weakened, leaving many citizens questioning whether this was really the only alternative. The European Union accession, with its promise, and these countries would have standard of living to their Western neighbors, was particularly disappointing. As neoliberalization brought with its vulnerability and economic exploitation of individuals, more and more people turn to communal ideologies promising security, pride, sense of belonging. They are becoming unashamed citizens. Previously, inaccessible archives were also opened, and this was the period of the archive fever, and described by Derrida as the archive fever. Historians and other public believe that the truth and its explanations are there, somewhere in the archive, and the good historians I find are just finding it. However, these two aspects, namely the failed promises of the neoliberalization in Eastern Europe, plus this kind of positivist epistemology and this archive fever, actually contributed to what we see now as the illiberal turn. However, this conviction that the truth is in the archive opened the gate for conspiracy theories who claim that some archives have got the ultimate truth, were hidden from professionals by unidentified powers. Illiberal memory politics uses this argument, but replaces the communists who hid or even destroyed the archives with liberals and cosmopolitans. The history of the Holocaust has become particularly vulnerable in the paradigm change, as it was based on normative, exclusivist, true-false framework without any negotiation about the content. And what we see now is how the unashamed citizens are renegotiating what previously had been thought not negotiable. To conclude, the historiography of the Holocaust could move forward substantially if it analyzed the causes, institutional forms, and main actors of oblivion. The post-1989 turn in historiography in Eastern Europe looked at the event through a true-false framework that also contributed to the populist turn in historiography, as it made history writing a form of defenseless post-truth. Truth and relevance are always socially mediated, and the belief of having the monopoly of interpretation is always temporary. History writing is a social practice which is deeply political. In the parallel reality created by illiberal polypore state, the well-being of the country's citizens depends on accepting the post-truth, whatever that should be then they are becoming a part of. The correlation between experience and knowledge is complex, while rejecting the two extreme poles of absolutism or the perfect knowledge and relativism. By investigating the relationship between the two poles is the only tool we have against the post-truth. Thank you very much.